Today, we're going to just touch on a couple of areas up front with some prepared comments and some prepared materials. And then we're going to dive into the Q&A as Leanne talked about. So first up, Ellie is going to give us an update on where we are with the independent active listening process. You can see it's at the top of the slide. It was obviously an important tenet of the plan and the actions that we had committed to do. We've been making some progress on that. So Ellie will share a little bit of progress on that. And then secondly, one of the themes that has come out is around transparency. And last time round, we tried to be a little bit more transparent, talking about the shape of the Nominet business and disclosing some of the revenue numbers in different parts of the business. We're going to continue that theme in terms of listening to your feedback and seeking for some more transparency. And we're going to have a couple of slides from Adam around some of our R&D activities and some of the work that we've been doing there over the years. And that hopefully will give members a little bit more clarity on those activities, some of the work that's been done and some of the questions that have been being asked. So two topics that we're going to cover, and then we'll dive into the various Q&A that members may have. So with that, Ellie, if you don't mind giving us a few minutes on the good progress that the team have been making on the listening process.
Thanks very much, Rob, and hello, everybody. So hopefully members on the call are aware that we've kicked off the active listening process now with Savanta, and this is a really important piece of work for us. We want to make sure we hear from all members, or as many members as possible, and also from broader stakeholders as well, in terms of their expectations and areas of focus that they want to see us look at as an organisation going forwards. We started that process with a short member poll where we were asking for members to tell us what their priority issues were. And it was fantastic to hear from 240 members. Really pleased with the people taking part, and we're grateful for that. Obviously, the challenge for us now as we move forward in the listening process is how we make sure that we also hear from the 90% of members who haven't yet got involved, and clearly there'll be lots of opportunity to do that as we move forward. So if we just go on to the next slide, this was an initial poll that Savanta ran for us, where we asked members to tell us their top 5 issues where they wanted to see focus from the organisation. And you can see here that just over half of members identified a public benefit and transparency in their top 5 areas where they wanted us to have more focus and to potentially look at ways that we can respond and address challenges there. We also gave you the opportunity to tell us about other things that weren't on the list, and I know that in asking you to prioritise those top 5 areas, there has been concern that in some way other things would be off the agenda, and that's absolutely not the case. We're really just trying to understand where that focus needs to be. So if we go on to the next slide, the next element of the exercise was asking you to tell us of those 5 areas for focus, what your top priorities were. And then you start to see some different things coming through. So in terms of top ranked priorities, we've got transparency there, but now price of .uk domain names coming through as the second priority. So and actually quite a mixed message and quite a spread across those different areas of focus. So all of this will inform the next phases of the listening process. And clearly we're already, as Rob said, in terms of that reform plan, taking action to address some of these areas of priority. But clearly, as we move forward, we will continue to do that and be thinking about how we can respond to all of the wide range of feedback that we hear through the whole of the listening exercise from members and from wider stakeholders too. So in terms of the next phase, if we go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we've done the priority issues poll, and that will help shape the discussions in the focus groups, which is the next phase of the process. And we'll also be doing some in-depth interviews as well. But as I've said, and it will be very clear if you're part of that process, that nothing's off the table. That was never the intention of that initial poll. It was really trying to get an initial cut of different members' perspectives. We're using randomised sampling by Savanta to identify participants for the focus groups and interviews. And we'll also be interviewing a small number of other stakeholders, including UK government representatives as well. So you may be selected to take part in a focus group. If you are, an invitation will be coming out this week. It would be fantastic if you could spare the time to engage in a focus group, to give us your perspectives, but also hear from other members around the table. This is what's most important about this, I think, is getting as wider perspectives as possible throughout the whole of the listening process, because critically, the outcomes from this will inform that broader review of our purpose, strategy, and the structure of the organisation going forward. So please do respond if you get an invitation to participate. And what we want to do as part of that process is really start to drill into the feedback we had through the poll. So I'm very conscious that we had sort of single words or a phrase when we asked you to prioritise a particular issue. Through the focus groups and interviews, we want to really get under the skin of that and delve into and understand what you meant by a particular response. So, taking public benefit as an example, as that coming up on that first slide as the issue that was prioritised most by members that responded to the poll. What do you mean by public benefit? Is it the social impact work that we're doing? Is it about being an organisation being not-for-profit? What is it that public benefit means, and how can we respond to that feedback? And that will be a key focus of those focus groups, really delving into getting under the skin of those issues. After this next phase of focus groups and interviews, we'll have a presentation actually from Savanta. We want to make sure that it's an independent process, and Savanta will be feeding back from those focus groups and interviews, and we'll hold a webinar like this where they can give you that feedback. And throughout the process, there will be opportunities to hear summaries of what we're hearing through the listening process. It's not a case of waiting until the report's published in September. So you'll be involved all along the way. And this next phase will, of course, inform the online consultation, which will be open to all members and stakeholders to participate in. And we're really, we're challenging ourselves and challenging Savanta to try to ensure that as many members as possible participate in that online consultation, so you can really get the breadth of views and perspectives in terms of informing the outputs from this process. So just a quick insight into what we've heard so far, and outlining where we're going next on the process. And if you are invited to participate in this next phase, please do. Thank you. I think I'll hand over to Adam now.
Well, just to before Adam picks up the baton, just to echo everything that Elise has said there in terms of thanks to all of those of you who participated. We do value your input and the contribution. We are trying to get to as many people as possible, so we will be reaching out to not only those people that engaged in the poll, but also those members that didn't, so that we can try and make sure that we get the full spectrum of feedback from everybody. Appreciate that, and thanks to those people who participated. The other point I wanted to make, we had some feedback from members that they valued that sort of peer-to-peer conversation, that networking. And so I think by having these focus groups and having a topic upon which we can center the conversation, it should give members also a good forum to bounce ideas off of one another on what are important topics for us moving forward. So, we'll think in the future, we can think about how we structure these, but these focus groups will be a great way to sort of start bouncing that around, that dialogue between members on important topics. So really look forward to hearing the output of those. And so, yes, with that, I'd like to introduce Adam Leach. As we mentioned earlier, Adam is our Chief Information Officer and has got just a couple of slides to talk a little bit around the work that we do around R&D. Transparency was on that list, and I'm well aware that as a board and as a company, we need to continue to work on building trust with members, and part of doing that is being more open and being transparent. And so we thought we'd use this as an opportunity to just spend a few minutes on this area, because it's been a source of some questions from members in the past. So we thought we'd try and share a little bit of information in the spirit of being asked to be more transparent. We've heard you, and this is what we're trying to respond with some of that information here. So Adam, over to you.
Right. Thanks, Rob. Good afternoon, everyone. So I've got some slides that has some financials and has some numbers. But before I get into that, I just wanted to kind of shed a bit of light on the Nominet's R&D journey that we've had and kind of explain what the ideas behind what we were doing. So the initial team for Nominet R&D was established in 2015. It was formed from an existing advanced projects team. And our initial focus for that team was to look at how we could improve the collection, storage, and analysis of DNS data. And we also looked at some particular areas where some malware was using DGA's, domain generating algorithms, as well, and to spend more time sort of understanding that. And the outcome of all of that work, sort of culminating in 2015, was a product called Bumblebee, which I'm sure some members on the call will remember. It's a DNS analysis tool, which then formed the basis of our work in cybersecurity, and which in turn has led to PDNS. So following spinning out internally Bumblebee into a different team, the R&D team then focused on exploring the Internet of Things, which at the time was more of an emerging topic, not an entirely new topic, but certainly an emerging topic. And we had a number of projects that we were focusing on here at the time, and all of them were trying to apply our knowledge of DNS, the DNS protocol, and the registry model into new areas. And you might remember there were projects such as the Oxford Flood Network. There was a trial with Ofcom for TV Whitespace. There was connecting rural parts of Scotland in Arran. We started our engagement with ZSL on how we could use IoT for conservation. And although there was a wide range of projects, they all had at the core of them, our contribution was to look at how we could offer some of that infrastructure to build an IoT application and what our role should be, similar to examining what our role is in internet infrastructure, that kind of small but important piece that we play. And we were trying to find that similar analogy within this kind of new field. So in 2018, what we did was try to rationalize that kind of portfolio of projects that we had and to focus on two main areas. And that was dynamic spectrum management, DSM, and autonomous vehicles. So our DSM work really built on what we were doing for TV Whitespace. So at this stage, we were already providing a registry for Ofcom for TV Whitespace in the UK. We then started to do these things for the same registry service for the FCC in the US for TV Whitespace, and we were looking at how we could improve the efficiency of spectrum was allocated, how we could get more people connected via wireless technologies. And so we were looking outside of TV Whitespace into new other bands, and we're also looking at other geographic regions as well with other regulators globally. So for AV, our work was mainly directed through the Innovate UK DCMS-backed project Driven. And we were taking our IoT tools that we'd developed in the kind of first part in our exploration around 2017, and we were applying that to the kind of new area of autonomous vehicles. And what we were using our tools to do was to collect and analyze data and allow then that to be used for a real-time insurance model. And we were doing that in concert with our partners of the Driven project, namely Oxbotica and AXA XL, which are a global insurer. And our objective there was to try and, what infrastructure needs to be in place and how can we make autonomous vehicles safer. We weren't providing all of the kind of AI to drive the vehicle and all that stuff. That was all for partners. The bit that we were focusing on were very much that kind of data collection and analysis and kind of cybersecurity elements of the AV chain. But in 2020, in early 2020, we decided to bring both of these areas to a conclusion. There was other areas that we wanted to invest in, we basically now Red Technologies, which is a company that focuses on spectrum management, now run and continue to develop our DSM platform. They've recently expanded TV whitespace into rural parts of Canada, as well as looking at other frequencies like 3.5 gigahertz. Our IoT platform that we developed in the from our earlier projects, but refined through our work on Driven, we open sourced and is used today, continues to be used by ZSL for their anti-poaching projects in conservation areas even globally. So also in 2020, we made a change in how in the model of innovation that Nominet was using. So previously we'd used a kind of centralized model with a separate R&D team, but we found that that really didn't work as well for us. So we've moved to a more decentralized model where we have innovation teams embedded within cyber and within our registry teams. So hopefully that gives you some context to what we've been doing in R&D over the years and where we got to. The next slide focuses on the financials over the period of FY19 and FY20 of what we spent on the autonomous vehicle projects, mainly through Driven. As you can see from that, most of our costs are really staff costs. We had a small team that was focused on this, and I think the peak was FY19. As you can see, we had 6 full-time equivalents working on that, and then that stepped down obviously in FY20 and then discontinued after that. So if we then look to spectrum management, so here this was something that had more nearer term kind of commercial opportunities that we're looking at, so had some revenue associated with it. Again, we can see here on the right, we have the costs for FY19 and FY20. It peaked in FY19 with costs of about £1 million, again, mainly driven by our staff costs of a team of 7. And that is it.
So Adam, thanks for that. Let me just so a couple of thoughts on that, right? So point number one, as I said at the outset, this has been, I know it's been a source of some questions in the past. And so what we have tried to do here is address some of those questions, be transparent about the level of investment and resources that we put to those projects. And so that's point number one. Point number two, I think innovation will always continue in a business like Nominet, and I fully expect it to. For a technology business like ours, innovation is critical. And so we have got to have a reasonable, right, not overblown, but a sensible sized team that focuses on innovation. And I think the switch in the model that Adam talked about to having that now more closely aligned with the business. So innovation within the core registry, innovation within cyber as needed, is absolutely the right thing. It drives better accountability. It drives innovation that's more closely aligned with the business solution that we're looking for. And I think what we're trying to do with that innovation is continue to be ahead of what needs to happen, right? I mean, obviously we're very proud of .uk and the registry business that we run. How do we maintain the level of robustness that is expected and needed? And what innovation do we need to keep pushing on to support that? And how can we continue to find areas that are in and around the registry space where we can innovate that potentially provide opportunities for our members to grow their business? So, we will continue to look at those. I think the change in the model drives more accountability and drives a clarity around what that innovation needs to look like. And so we've, with the 2 instances that Adam has walked you through, those are now in the past. We made those decisions to exit those 2 things in early 2020. There is no continuing investment with any of those activities. And we've shifted the model, as I say, to focus much more on, what is needed in the individual parts of the business. So the intent of that was to give a little bit of color and to try and address some of the questions and concerns that members have raised. talk a little bit about how we're handling R&D moving forward. As I say, I continue to believe that R&D and innovation is the lifeblood of any technology company. So we need to continue to make that something that we look at, but do it in a way that's appropriate in terms of size and scale of investment, and is closely aligned to the business that we're supporting and how we can explore what would be in the best interest of members. And so that shift in that model that we made last year, I think, more closely aligns with that. So with that, that's the end of the two topics that we wanted to just sort of update members on and prepared remarks. So I think we want to use the rest of the time to deal with questions and points that people have raised.
Thanks, Rob.
So,
thanks, Ellie. Thanks, Adam. So on R&D particularly, I know that Susanna, who's on the call, had some specific questions. Susanna, is there anything else that you want to ask on the back of what you've heard from Adam and Rob there? If you can take yourself off mute.
I just unmuted. Well, first, hi, Rob, hi, Ellie, and Adam, hi. Thanks very much indeed for the information on Oxbotica and Whitespace Spectrum. So roughly what you're saying is about £2.5 million was invested in those what you term R&D projects, and that's really helpful to know. I asked for this info about 3 weeks ago, so I'm grateful that you've managed to just put us in the picture a little bit. That's instructive. Obviously, other members may want to consider whether or not the aborted ventures into the sort of automated cars and the Whitespace Spectrum, whether that was really relevant to the core business, the core purposes that Nominet was set up for. But I wondered whether I could just ask about two other areas of expenditure which Nominet have and also the present board have sanctioned. The first one is, of course, Siglass itself. And I'm just wondering, in terms of money in, money that's gone out and money that's come in up to this April, what is the rough profit or loss to Nominet of the Siglass venture from its beginning, including the acquisitions, but also all the staff overheads up to the present time? So that's the one area. And the second area is obviously the contracts for TLD backend services. And in terms of those services, I know you can't disclose, for commercial reasons and competitive reasons, you're not going to want to disclose exact contract details of all the financial implications. But if you bundle those together, could you give a rough picture, a rough figure for the profit or loss to Nominet of the aggregated contracts of TLD backend services to date? Not counting obviously country code, and I'm not actually thinking of .cymru or .wales, but the other contracts that Nominet has taken on in recent years, which obviously have been sanctioned by the board. And I'm not talking about anticipated profit in the future, which I notice in your annual accounts is how that is kind of represented. But right as of this minute, the balance of money in and the balance of money out, as things stand, do those contracts involve a profit or a loss? And are there further payments out that Nominet have to make on an annual or long-term basis? It's just that this is obviously the company's money, and understandably members, myself or others, are, just want to have some rough picture of whether or not these are are projects which the board should have taken on.
Okay.
But I'll end there, but except just to say that one colleague, one fellow member suggested to me that Siglass has really had only an income this year of about, in terms of contracts, of about £200,000 or something like that. That may not be true, but
So let me take a crack at answering some of the points that you've raised. So I'll take each of the two businesses in turn. If I take the RSP business in its totality, you're right. There are commercial sensitivities that mean I'm clearly going to be reticent about disclosing some of the specifics on a wide call like this. What I can say is a couple of things. One is we enter all of those contracts on a commercial basis, right? It is important to understand that there is not one part of the business that subsidizes another part of the business in doing that piece of activity. Okay, so I think members should understand that those individual contracts are looked purely on a standalone commercial basis, and hence the reason, you know, we win some, we lose some, right? So that's point number one. Point number two, I would say that if you look at the direct costs associated with that business, that part of the business contributes positively to the profitability of the company. If you burden it with a reasonable or fair allocation of overhead, then it's probably about a break-even business, right? So in terms of input, if you will, or impact on the financial statements, you know, the amounts involved are A, relatively modest, and and B, at a direct basis, they contribute positively. If you have it burden it, share the overheads, then it's about break even. So from if members are concerned about one part of the business subsidizing another part of the business, then I can assure you that that is not the case. Commercially, we enter into those agreements on that basis, and you know, what we see in the financial results would underpin that. Cyglass is a slightly different proposition. So Cyglass is an acquisition that the company made a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, in terms of on the cyber side of things. That business is currently making a loss. We are currently looking at, there's some open questions around how much of the IP associated with that is attributable to the work that we do around PDNS versus not. Okay, and so there is some ongoing conversations as we look to essentially allocate out the right amount of cost and activity amongst those teams. I will say that Cyglass is making a loss at the moment. Now, obviously, whenever one enters a business venture like this or an acquisition like this, there are some startup costs with some expectation of realizing future value, and that is absolutely the case in this situation. There's some ongoing work that the board is doing looking at this area and trying to get that good understanding of IP around, kind of the work that the Cyglass team does, how much of that goes into some of the local government solutions, for example, that they're looking to sell today versus how much plays across into the wider sort of PDNS government security work that we do. So that one is still a little bit work in progress from a board point of view. We've still got some more work to do to sift our way through that. I'll certainly be happy to come back to members when I've got something that I feel comfortable we've touched bottom in getting the right allocation of costs and activities there. So I certainly acknowledge that it's making a loss at the minute. And as I said, with any startup activity or any investment that you're making, that would be the case. And we've embarked on it with an intention that it clearly is profitable and contributes well to the group. We've got a bit more work to do to really isolate and ring fence, some of the work that we're doing around the financials there. And I'll be happy to come back to members once that work is complete.
Thank you, Rob. And, we all want the best for Nominet. We want Nominet to be profitable. So I totally take on board your intentions. What you've said basically is we're about £7.5 million down if you take the acquisition of Cyglass and the loss on the Spectrum and the automated cars. But there are other factors which those ventures feed into. I guess that's what you seem to be saying.
For sure, partly, right? I mean, Adam talked about why we embarked on the ventures that we did, and and there are reasons why we do that, and we're looking at things that we think are natural extensions of the business that we have today. So how can these things either help the registry business or the cyber business that we have with the PDNS contract? We're not, I don't expect to go into car manufacturing or anything that's not, kind of not adjacent to some of the things that we do. And it's clear we understand the concerns that members have. We understand, the feedback that we're hearing. Obviously, some of these decisions were taken many years ago, long before, certainly some of the members of the board were around, and so all we can do is continue to work through the feedback that we get from you all and shape the right direction and strategy that we have for the business, right? And that's what we're trying to do. So it's work in progress and we're looking at it.
Thanks for your answers.
Thanks.
Okay, Leanne.
Right, moving on. Chris Hemmings. Hi, Chris. I know that you put in talking about future plans and timelines. Was there something specific that you wanted to ask around that?
No, not specifically, just more of a general roadmap of what work streams are being undertaken now and sort of milestones against them.
Okay.
So if we can pop up the sort of discussion point slide. It doesn't have milestones, Chris, but let me try and between Ellie and I, we'll try and tag team this slide that's got a few bullets on it. So can we pull that
stick that slide up?
While the slide's coming up, I was going
to say, first one's registry. Why don't you talk about the Registry Advisory Council, Ellie?
Chris, that I don't want to just talk about the listening process, but obviously very, very conscious that the listening process is absolutely critical in terms of how we move forward, and hearing perspectives and hearing views through that process will then inform the review of our purpose, our strategy, and our structure in the autumn. So that is an absolutely key sort of work stream that we'll be progressing through over the next few months. Obviously, simultaneously, we've got work ongoing with the Registry Advisory Council. I know that the design group is progressing really well. I know there's been lots of debate and discussion in that group around things like scope, in terms of the different membership of that group. I understand that they, critically, this is a member-led group. I'm certainly not part of it. And so it's very much down to the members of the design group to come up with the recommendations of how the Registry Advisory Council should work. I know there's been a lot of debate around things like scope and the constituents. Is it a registrar group? Is it a membership group? And those kind of elements. And I know they've got another couple of meetings taking place this month in order to continue to progress thinking, and we will shortly, hopefully, then be able to go out for the elections process and get that Registry Advisory Council. So that's a key piece of work that's ongoing as well. Rob,
and the timing for that was sort of June or July, wasn't it, Ellie, that we would hope to come out?
I think the kind of aim is still to get the first meeting in June. Obviously, we need to make sure that the members who want to participate in the Registry Advisory Council itself have time to stand and be part of that process. So we need to make sure that it works in the right timeframes. But I know that the design group are very focused on progressing through the remaining decisions that they have as quickly as they can.
And then, quick update with where we are. So the process for recruiting a new chair is well underway. The nominations committee of the board has got a review tomorrow, as an example, with the recruiting firm that is leading the search to review the long list of candidates. We'll have a couple of reviews of the long list, and then we'll whittle that down to a short list, as you might imagine. And we're launching the CEO recruitment. We've just been finalising one or two bits and pieces with that, so that's progressing. A couple of points that we've sort of grouped together here under sort of comms, transparency, reporting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a couple of things here. We've talked about, and this is indeed one of the monthly Zoom calls, and I know a bunch more have been scheduled out into over coming months. We had a request on how we could, how members could engage with board directors in particular. So we are launching a new email alias, a new email address Nominet board at nominet.uk, which will allow members to direct questions to members of the board. You know, I will say that we will look to respond to those in as timely a fashion as we reasonably can. You know, but it does provide a forum for members to engage with the board as needed. Obviously, segmental financial reporting, we've talked about that in the past, and that work is continuing. You know, Ben and his team are working on how we can you know, break that out as we move forward with our financial reporting. We're doing a soft launch of the member hub next week. Ellie, I don't know if there's anything you want to touch on with that particularly.
Yeah, I'm just, so we have promised a member hub that I know Leanne and the team have been working hard to bring together all the different resources for members. It is a soft launch and we're really interested in feedback. Of course, a key thing that won't be part of the hub initially is the new forum, and the thinking there is that we want to really understand what members want from a new forum, and that will be part of the listening process. So we want to make sure that anything we do deliver is useful and is addressing what members would want to see from a new forum going forwards. But have a look at the new hub. Let us know if there's things that you'd like to see on there. There'll be ways to contact, obviously, the member engagement team, but equally send a message through to the board at Nominet as well. And we'll continue to develop and build that out as a resource for members going forwards. And the other point just to note as well is that we've kicked off the recruitment for a new head of member engagement. They will work with our existing team who I know go out of their way in trying to run great events and engage with members, and will continue to do so. But we're adding to that team, so there's more resource there dedicated to member engagement going forwards.
Thanks, Ellie. And a couple of last things from me. So yes, the REMCOM is looking at the executive pay benchmarking, so that work has started, and obviously we'll come back to members in due course as appropriate on that particular topic. And then the last thing from me, I know that there's been some comment about board reports and the fact that in the past the company has, you know, prepared a summary of topics that were discussed at board meetings. From a personal perspective, I'm quite happy to continue to do that. So between Ellie and I, we will work on getting that out. So I'll obviously prepare it, and then Ellie and the team will figure out a way that we can get some sort of high-level board reports, get those published again, and get those communicating to members in the interests of transparency and listening to some of the things that people are asking for. Them, we'd like to do that. I will say that obviously with a new chair and a new CEO potentially coming in, it will be down to them to make the decision as to how they want to handle that moving forward. But in the short term, to address any concerns that members may have, we will reinstate board reports, you know, moving forward for subsequent board meetings.
Thanks, Rob. Can I just invite Andrew Bennett to unmute? I know Andrew had quite a few questions. So chair recruitment, CEO recruitment, listening process, member hub, forum, and also Registry Advisory Council. So just want to ask if there is anything that you don't feel has been covered. Andrew?
Hello. You've covered most of them already in this webinar. There is one question I'd like to ask. At the last meeting, you mentioned a prize promotion for Nominet 25th anniversary. And as Nominet is 25 on the end of this month, I just wondered where that promotion is and what are the details, or what kind of promotion it will be, because many of us are expecting some kind of renewal promotion with a lot of .uk expiring in June, and whether we'll get a discount on renewing the .uk in June.
Okay, thanks. Ellie?
We're not yet ready, I'm afraid, Andrew, to announce the promotion. We have been looking at this actively and have, looking to make a recommendation in terms of what that will look like. Our objective with the promotion will be to deliver something that is as useful and as engaging for as many registrars as possible and different business models across the membership. That will be the point of that. And absolutely, it will be about, as usual, it will be about driving registrations and renewals and or both. So we're just finalising the details. So I'm sorry, I can't set that out today, but bear with us. We have committed to promotions this year.
Thanks, Ellie. William, poll. Can I come to you? I know you submitted some comments around engagement with members. I wondered whether you wanted to just expand on that a little bit, and maybe Rob or Ellie can respond to that. If you'd like to take yourself off mute.
Am I on?
You are on.
Right, it's turned green. Right, well, I'm quite intrigued because in a past life, I designed and developed spectrum monitoring equipment for all sorts of purposes, including Ofcom and others. And I must say, it came as a shock out of the blue to me to realise that Nominet was in the TV white spaces space. I obviously wasn't paying proper attention, and I readily confess that despite having been a member from 94 or whenever it started, or before it started, I have not necessarily attended to the member communications as much as I should have done. Of course, all that has now changed, and I'm completely 100% on top of everything that comes out of Nominet and keen to follow up on it. But at the time that TV white spaces was being kicked around about 4 or 5 years ago, I remember having a long debate with one of the people involved, concluded that he didn't know what he was talking, and that was a disaster. I'm very sorry I didn't get the opportunity to share this view with you at the time. It could have saved everyone a lot of trouble. As far as the Internet of Things is concerned as well, read my LinkedIn page and you'll see I invented that in 1997. But I better stop claiming these things, or people would start to investigate them closely and ask me further and deeper questions. But basically, the interesting thing that I discovered since getting involved with the discussion groups on this is that there's a huge amount of really good talent involved in the very individualistic members of the Nominet family spread across the industry, and had been spread obviously from a very long time ago, from the early days. And we those of us who can remember that far back, have a slightly altruistic approach to many things, which obviously chimes with the general idea of public benefit. And again, I haven't really been paying that much attention, other than occasional comments from others in the industry. But I have had a lot of other things on my plate in the meantime. The bad news for you is I've got a lot less on my plate now, and I can actually focus much more closely on what's going on. And I think that we all appreciate what you're trying to do. We all know you've got a really tough job at the moment. There's a lot of talented people firing a lot of awkward questions, and we all generally tend to reiterate the view that the foot soldiers of Nominet do an extremely efficient job. And I've asked a few questions recently, which have proven once again that they are totally on top of their job and capable to do it. But we would feel like it would be nicer to be more involved in the higher level stuff without having to wade through the massive process, which obviously now you are even more obliged to observe, given the heads up of the recent EGM and the various fragmentation grenades that have followed. So thank you for asking my opinion on that. Next time you want to get involved with something, ask me, and I've probably done it already 20 years ago. Thank you.
You might regret that, William. You never know. We might be asking you about all sorts of things going forward now.
Perhaps we should get into car manufacturing after all. No, look. In all seriousness, I think so. Thank you for that. We certainly will. So a couple of things.
Before you let me go, I've got one point to make. That on car manufacturing.
I was only joking about car manufacturing.
Well, last time I was formally employed by anybody, it was with Alan Sugar, when we were doing the Amstrad 1640 computer series. And at the end of that, on the day that he announced that Amstrad's PC 15, 12 sales have overtaken IBM in Europe by volume. He said, right, well, we've cracked computers. Shall we have a go at cars or aircraft next? Sadly, he didn't, because we could probably make a thundering success of either of those as well. Right, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. So thank you. I mean, just sort of the interest from the Nominet side around things like AV and white space, it's less about the technology itself, and Adam should speak more to this than me. He's clearly more capable. It's less about the technology itself, but rather, how would a registry-like model support something like that? So it's not whether or not this widget does that to this widget. It's how can some of the skills and experiences that Nominet has in running a world-class registry, how can that translate into a business model like that, right? So I think it's important to understand our interest in this is we're coming at it from a particular angle with a particular niche, right? All of that said, we've stopped being in both of those businesses, and we have done now for over a year. So, we're moving forward. The whole point of sharing this was it was a question from members. It was clearly a sore point, and we wanted to address that and be transparent around it and essentially move on, right? We've got a different innovation model now. Innovation will be key to what we do, and we will continue to be as transparent as we can be about what that innovation looks like. Sorry, Leanne.
Rob, I just wanted to pick up really quickly on that point, though, because this point about member engagement and how members are involved in Nominet is really key, and clearly we are hoping that the Registry Advisory Council and the way that that's designed by members for members is going to address some of those elements. We also know, though, that we've got to find better ways to communicate with members. Not all members are even signed up for anything more than sort of legal requirements in terms of the communications. And the poll, like I said, although it's fantastic that 240 members responded, that tells us that 90% of members didn't engage in that. And so that's really a challenge for us. And from a public benefit perspective, we've run a series of webinars about our public benefit work, and we've had, I think, about 10 members attend those webinars. So something's not right about that. If public benefit is so high on the agenda, but actually we're running sessions to talk about the work that we're doing in that area, and happy to take questions and challenge and respond on that topic. We've got to find a way to do that you want to engage with and you want to get involved with. So we have a session next month, for example, on public benefit. Really happy to talk about the work we're doing from a social impact perspective, how we measure that, the way that we work with partners, all of those things. And I'd really encourage people to come along if that public benefit piece is absolutely at the top of your agenda. We're really happy to talk about what we're doing. As you know, that the investments have increased significantly this year, and going forwards, it's going to be 10% of revenues. So these are significant investments, and it's important that we hear members' perspectives.
Well, you've given me a lovely plug there, Ellie, because we've actually got a public benefit webinar scheduled for the 10th of June. And I'm so excited that there are so many members on this call today, because I'm expecting just as many to join us on the 10th of June at 2 o'clock. So please do sign up. And also we had Martin Ford on the call, because Martin mentioned that public benefit was one of the things that he particularly wanted to talk about today. I can see that somebody called Martin is in the call, but they don't have a surname. So if it is you, Martin Ford, then please do unmute. And if you have anything else to ask about public benefit, then Ellie is here. No, Martin is not unmuting. So maybe you have said enough, Ellie. I can see that Matthew Richardson has got his hand raised. So I'm going to come to you next, Matthew, please.
Thank you very much for that. I've got a very quick sort of governance question. Shortly after the EGM, Robin sent round a circular to members talking about appointing directors. And it says, our bylaws and corporate governance standards require that we follow a robust process. I've been unable to find copies of actual bylaws which would be binding on Nominet, and I've asked in respect of the appointment of directors, and I'm wondering what the board's view was. Why did they, on what basis did they think they were unable to appoint the two directors following the EGM?
Thanks, Matthew.
So, well, let me take a crack, right? So, yeah, I think there's a couple of points I would draw out, and if any of my fellow directors want to chip in and feel that I've missed anything, then please do. If you look at the overall composition of the board, it's laid out that essentially you've got three categories of director. You've got member-elected directors, you have independent non-executive directors, and you have members representing, or directors, sorry, representing the executive team. So, the CEO and employees. And it's an important part of the governance structure that all three of those are represented. And so when you look at the independent directors that get appointed, these people, whoever they may be, for whatever role and whatever company, you want to go through a good governance process. It's the right thing to do, to go through and make sure that those individuals have got the right skills, the right experience, can commit the time, are willing to sign up for the period of time that's necessary in order to do this, etc., etc., etc. In the context of post the EGM world, we've got a situation where we need a chair, and we need a chair who is willing to steer the company through the next extended period of time. You want a chair who can help bring in a new CEO, shape the strategy and direction, listen to the members, get the feedback, drive the engagement, the strategy, the output of the listening process. All of these things are not short-term fixes. These are long-term fixes. And so from our point of view as a board, it was really important that we felt like we could get somebody who was qualified and capable for the job. And certainly in my discussions with, Sir Michael, and some of I had a number of discussions with Sir Michael, there were certain skills and qualities that he would definitely bring to the board. But it's also a situation where, this is a long-term commitment for the chair. We are talking about a body of work here to drive these reform, these activities, shape the direction of the business. It's not a 3-month or a 6-month exercise. And so, the board felt that the right thing to do was to go through a robust governance process. And indeed, some of our stakeholders, like the government, for example, would expect us to meet certain standards in terms of that board appointment. So there is, I'm probably going to get the title wrong, but there's a set of guidelines around public office appointments that the government would expect. I think it's something like the OCPA or OPCA or something like that, which really defines what they expect, in terms of a process to make appointments like this. And the board felt it was important that we went through that process, that we picked the best candidates for the role, and people who can not only bring to bear the quality and skills that we need. So, for example, we need a new REMCOM chair, as an example. So we're looking for people who could potentially fill that brief, but also people who would be willing to commit to the necessary time and duration that this requires. So the board felt like it was important that we went through the right process.
Thanks, Rob.
And so we've launched that process, and I do just want to say, right, because I think there's a couple of stories that I hear, that we are trying to, maybe hijack the election process or something that is due later this year. I just want to be crystal clear. We are not going to do that. The election process for directors will continue this year as scheduled, right? So I don't know where these rumors start. I don't know who starts them. It doesn't come from the board. I can tell you that for nothing. We are committed to continuing to have that election process. So I just want to be absolutely crystal clear while we're on the subject of governance. I've heard that story is doing the rounds, and I just wanted to use this opportunity to point out to everybody that is going to continue. Sorry,
Thank you
Leanne,
very
I
much.
didn't mean to.
Thank you very much for that. That was most helpful.
That's okay. No need to apologise to me, Rob. I think I interrupted you. Right, okay. James Moore. Do we have James Moore on the line? James had some EGM questions. Is there anything else that you want to ask?
Hello, can you hear me?
You can hear you, James.
Yes, we can.
I think one of the questions was why, or would you be able to explain would you let all the members that voted no make them aware of public benefit?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question. Could you repeat it?
Basically, I think you phoned everybody up, sorry, the board before the EGM, trying to get all the members to agree to a no vote. But there was no no mention to those members that voted no that there was a campaign, where the campaign was and what their arguments were. And it seemed undemocratic not for the board to actually explain what the other side's argument was.
Well, look, so there's a couple of ways I can answer that. So let me start with a positive. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, right? I said it to Simon. That he clearly ran a good campaign, a strong campaign, and it would be churlish of me or other members of the board not to acknowledge that, right? So credit where credit is due. Simon ran a good campaign. I don't see, that said, I don't see him putting the contrary point of view as to what the board might think in his campaign materials, right? So, I don't, I think it's the nature of an election like this. The board came out and said that it opposed the motion, right? And it wasn't a question that the board didn't recognize the need for change. The board acknowledged and recognized that need for change. We just felt that the remedy was the wrong remedy, essentially, right? So I think that, you could say, well, why didn't you point out public benefit? Well, at no point did I see public benefit pointing out the good things that the company had been doing and has been doing, right? So it's a little bit of nature of an election campaign. And I say that in, hopefully everybody understands that I say that in good faith, because I just acknowledged that I felt Simon ran a good campaign, and I've told him that, right? So I'm not here to criticize him or anybody else, but it's the nature of an election, right? If you're Tory or you're Labour, at one point you don't stand around saying, well, what a great job the other team is doing on this, that, and the other. It's just, that's not what happens in an election campaign. So, I understand the point you're making. That is behind us now, and I think what we're trying to do is move forward.
As everybody's been talking about moving forward, would you let public benefit have access to the membership if because there seems to be a groundswell of opinion that they need another EGM.
Look, I'm not going to respond to a groundswell of their opinion on what they think they may or may not need to do, right? That's just, that's not appropriate for me to do that. The board has, I've said this before, right? Before the EGM vote, the board recognized the need for change. Clearly that was not sufficient for members. We've reflected on that. We've laid out the reform plan. We've identified those areas where the original 7-point plan didn't go far enough. We're trying to take a series and actions. My slide that we opened this call with was the framework for us to do that. That's what we're moving forward on. Personally, we believe that's the right way forward. We're trying to listen to the feedback from members. As you saw from that survey, there's a wide diversity of opinions and points of view on what we need to do. The one thing I'm absolutely certain of is I am not going to please all of the members all of the time. I can guarantee it, because if you just look at that spectrum of people's views, and that's only 10% of the members who voted. So at the end of the day, I can't respond to whether or not people think they want a second EGM or not. That's for everybody else. Me and the board and Ellie and the team, we're committed to trying to do the right thing for this company, drive the series of change, and the rest of it is in the hands of the members. We are responding to the listening process. We're putting in a program of change. That's what we're focused on. I'm focused on the things that matter to you and your business. And does having another EGM matter to you and your business? I don't know. That's up for you guys to decide. I'm focused on us delivering that reform plan that we laid out and driving all the things that we said we would do.
Thanks, Rob. Sorry, I realised that we're slightly over time, but I'm just going to squeeze another couple of questions in.
Yeah, no, Leanne, let's roll for a little bit longer and see if we can get some more questions in.
Okay, do we have Cyprian? I think we've got Cyprian on the call, and Cyprian wanted to ask something about expired domains. Do you want to take yourself off mute? Ooh. Oh, no, he is there. No? Okay, I'll move on. Stuart Grove. Stuart had wanted to make some comments on post EGM director appointments. Is Stuart there? Do you want to take
Yes, I am here.
Hi, Stuart.
Right. Cool. You caught me out. I tried to remember what I asked and why I was asking it. Yes. If I could pick up Rob on his last response. I was obviously one of the people who voted no. Sorry, yes. What I really would be surprised is on the board's view of how we would interpret their actions. It is quite clear that the board had lost the confidence of the majority of members, and therefore what's important going forward, not only what they do, but what they're perceived to do because of the lack of trust. And therefore the appointment, temporary or otherwise, of independent directors who the majority of members could trust was an aspiration. And I would ask Rob if he feels this aspiration has been delivered. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
It hasn't been delivered because we haven't appointed the new, we don't have a new chair and we don't have new independent directors.
You'd appoint two directors.
I'm sorry?
You'd appoint two directors, I think.
Yes, but to my earlier remarks, right, the governance model that Nominet has is that you have to have directors from each one of those three buckets. And by removing Russell, Ellie and Ben, there were no representatives from the company, and that's an important plank in the company's governance model that you have those people on the board, right? So that was directly in response to that. We are still working the process of hiring a new chair and hiring new independent directors, and as we talked about earlier, we're making good progress on the chair. We did invite Sir Michael to participate in that. In that discussion. I mean, for those of you that were on the previous call that we had last month, you'll know that I had a number of conversations with Sir Michael about the future. We did invite him to participate in that process. The agency that we have employed to lead the search reached out to him and directly contacted him, and he has declined to participate. So we are continuing with that search. And as I said earlier, we are reviewing the first long list of candidates on that tomorrow. And I hope to be able to announce, an appointment in due course.
Great, thanks, Rob. I'm just having I don't see anybody's hands raised. And I do apologise because you're not all on the same screen. So if you've been like that for the entire time, I'm sorry that I've not managed to get to you. I can see quite a few comments in the chat, and there's some comments around the RAC and that kind of stuff. So I will feed that back to Ellie and the team who are sort of providing the secretarial support for the RSC design group. There's another question in here from Cyprian. A question for Rob and Ellie. Is Nominet a not-for-profit or not? As the acting chair and CEO, we would like to know your view.
Well, so the view as is laid out in the articles of the company is that we act in public interest. It does not say we are a not-for-profit company. It says that we will act in the public interest.
Okay.
Ellie, do you want to, is there anything, Ellie?
And we are, by the very nature of being a company limited by guarantee and a membership organisation, we are a company that's not for profit distribution as well. But, you know, that public interest is absolutely, it wasn't always in the articles, it was added after Nominet quoted 25 years or so ago, and that is really critical in terms of the obligations on the company to act for the broader public interest and to act for public benefit, and that is absolutely at the heart of the organisation and should always continue to be.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, I've scrolled through the chat and I think we've got through the questions. Does anybody want to very, very quickly raise their hand and squeeze one last question in? Ooh.
While you're waiting, Leanne, can I just say as well, we will publish the results from the Savanta research, the poll, and obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, the next phase we'll get Savanta to report back on. So that will be an opportunity for members to hear directly from Savanta as well.
And you know, if we've got no further questions, I'd like to thank everybody for their engagement, their time today. I really appreciate it. As I said, as we are pressing on, your views are important. The listening process is important to us. I'd love to get more feedback from members. You know, 250 responses or 240 responses was great, but it wasn't 2,000 plus, right? So I'm hoping that as we continue to go through this, more and more members will engage, more and more members will give us this feedback. You know, I recognize to some of the comments that have been made, look, I recognize that the board has got to continue to work on building trust with members, right? That's clearly understood, and we will keep doing that, and we will keep working on that and being transparent and so on and so forth. I think a couple of points I would make. One is we should focus on what the company is doing and all the things that it's doing to support members, the registry operations. You know, those are the things that are important to me, and how we can continue to do that, and understanding the things that are relevant to you as members and how they affect your business on a day-to-day basis. Some of the issues that we're talking about are not directly don't directly impact your businesses on a day-to-day basis. So how can the work that Nominet does continue to help for the benefit of all of our members, right? Rather than, you know, focusing on some of these issues which, you know, don't directly correlate to that. So I realize that there's more work to do. I'm not blind to that, right? And I hope through communications like this and others and some of the things that we've shared that you understand that and you recognize the progress that we're making. But please, you know, do continue to engage. We do appreciate the feedback. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Just one second, because Edward and Chris have very sneakily just got a couple of raised hands in. So Edward and Chris, if you're super quick. Edward first.
Yeah.
Take yourself off the mute, that's it.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find the button to raise my hand. My question really is about the software that Nominet has developed and uses for various parts of its operations, whether that's the registry, cybersecurity, things like that. Are there any plans to look at open sourcing that software for public benefit where would be legally possible, where it's not encumbered by other things?
So Adam is better positioned to answer that than me. But what I would say is, you know, look, when you're dealing with matters of national security, open source is perhaps not the natural place for software, right? And I'm sure you can appreciate the sensitivities around that. As Adam articulated, we did open source some of the software that came out of those R&D projects. And so we have certainly done that, and we will look to do that in the past where appropriate. But clearly, with some of the things that we deal with, that is not an appropriate model.
Adam, you want to
Yeah,
add
just
to that?
to add to that. So I think in the past we've done more in open source, and I think we want to get back within our core engineering and do more of that. And whether that's open sourcing software we've developed, or whether that's engaging in more open source in the community, and in the open source community, we do want to do more of that. I think we've got to identify the right places for us to engage and the right parts of the software that we use to open source. But it's something that we're keen to look at, and acknowledge that it's a way that we can contribute to the community and to add to the public benefit that we do by doing that. And also, it's open source is a great way for members or other people to also get involved in the innovation we do. So I think for both those reasons, it's definitely worth us.
I think that, just to underline that, Adam, I think that's absolutely right. I think we probably used to do more in the past, and we've pulled back more in that space, and we recognise that we have a responsibility and a role to play, but it might not be core system code, but it might be about playing our part and making sure we do that responsibly.
One of the examples I'm thinking of is CZNIC, who run .cz. Their entire registry stack is open source. They also build the NOT DNS server, both authoritative and recursive. They build BIRD, the BGP and OSPF, the routing daemons. They have a huge contribution to open source software. And other registries have done things where they, for example, SIDN, who run .nl, they do some stuff themselves, and they also fund NLNet Labs, a separate one, who build related things like NSD, DNS stuff. So
I think it's a valuable point, and I think it's something that we can definitely do more of.
Yeah,
thanks, Edward. Sorry, really conscious of time now, and we're definitely over. Chris, have you got something super quick to ask?
Yep, be mindful of time. So it was mentioned earlier that following the survey, we've had a relatively low number of members feeding back as to what their priorities are. Prior to the EGM, I certainly know Mark Wood was heavily canvassing members, getting feedback on what their priorities were. I assume that they were documented, and if so, is that something that's going to be considered as well as additional input into steering of Nominet?
Thanks, Chris. Ellie, is that maybe one for you?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think in terms of the listening process, I think what we're trying to do with that is have a really robust and independent process, and make sure that creates a foundation on which we can do that broader review. Clearly there's lots of different ways that members have engaged in the past, and we've heard feedback, but I'm conscious that probably wasn't it. It wouldn't be so robust in terms of a basis on which for decision making to take place going forwards. But it's a fair point. I'm trying to think of the example of how that was done. I'm sorry if I'm racking my brains, but maybe I
think Chris is probably talking about when we were talking to members before, during the EGM, and members were telling us what their concerns were. Whether we've captured that data and whether we can feed that into the listening process is,
I think probably not in as robust a way as we'd want to have an independent process that I hope will stand up to all of your scrutiny. I think is the short answer.
I think the independent piece is important there, really.
And hear that feedback, then absolutely. That was the basis on which some of the plans that we put forward before the EGM were built. Clearly, we recognise we need to do more, and we will and are doing more. But I think the point of an independent process is that it is there to be scrutinised, and we should all be able to have confidence in that process when it's completed.
Thanks, Ellie. Okay, I have pushed it, so apologies for running over. I just want to say thanks very much to everybody, for the Nominet people for coming on, and also all you members too. And thank you very much to the member who has signed up to the public benefit webinar whilst we have been live. I look forward to seeing you on the 10th of June.
And thanks to you, Leanne, as well. Well
that's
done.
okay, pleasure.
Right.
So thanks very much, and we will see you all soon.
Thanks, Leanne.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.